Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Search with Candour. I am your host, Jack Chambers-Ward, as always, and I'm joined by two fellow Candourlorians this week. I'll start off by introducing our principal SEO consultant, Mr. Brendan Bennett. He has worked in digital marketing, graphic design, digital PR, SEO, and basically everything over the last 15 years, give or take. And he's our resident dungeon master and political expert. Welcome to Search with Candour, Brendan.
That's very kind. That's a pretty comprehensive introduction. Thanks, Jack. It.
And our digital design lead, Mr. Mark Salisbury, welcome to the show. I know you've worked in graphic design, branding for almost 20 years now. You've worked with brands like the BBC, like the UEA here in Norwich, like UGG and Nike as well. And we're going to be talking about something very interesting. I know you guys have something very interesting to talk about. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here, Jack. It's nice to be on the Search with Candour podcast.
It's nice to, I know, I've been trying to get you both on for a very long time. We've finally made it happen. And it's going to be an interesting discussion because you might have noticed, folks, Brendan, I mentioned, is our principal SEO consultant. Mark is our design lead. So we've got designers versus SEOs. No, we're not doing that. We promised we're not doing that. We did specifically say we're not going to do a versus. But I think it is an interesting conversation that's happening a lot in both of our industries at the moment. How much overlap there is between development, graphic design, web design, SEO, all this kind of stuff. And I think the conversation over the last couple of years in SEO, and I wonder if you agree with this, Brendan, is that it's been a lot of, we need to get out of our silos. We need to get a better sort of understanding of the other channels. And I feel like we're now expanding that outside of just the other marketing channels as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually fair to say. Although I suppose my perspective is that talk of silos and getting out of silos is something that kind of haunts the digital marketing sphere and agency team historically. You know, so there's always talk about breaking down those walls and making sure everyone is collaborating. But yeah, certainly now, perhaps more than ever, brand is a particular component. As you've been a brand specialist to some degree, I think that is definitely becoming a bigger part of the conversation. And yeah, actually, you know, as SEO develops, as my sort of instincts develop, I do often think of design as part of the challenge, or at least a big component of what we're talking about when we're talking about page quality, user experience, all of which adds up to a kind of, you know, collective sense of SEO and optimization. So yeah, not sure if that quite answers your question, but I certainly think it's emerging again. And with agentic, I think that's one thing to keep an eye on in terms of where maybe your best practices with design, UX are actually coming back to the fore to some extent, the way that SEO and design can work together over.
You mentioned brand there, Brendan. I think we're going to kick off with a hot topic. So I know this is something you are very passionate about. I know we've been working a lot internally on our brand recently. I know you're the driving factor behind that, right, Mark?
Yeah, 100%. It's always internal stuff, and internal agency brands are always the thing that we tend to leave till last, right? But we've been doing a lot of stuff on the Candour brand, and that's been a super interesting process for me as someone that tends to work externally on people's brands, to be able to really get to the nitty-gritty of not just all the big stuff, but all the really small things about how we actually use things internally, and getting into all of that has been super interesting. But interesting what Brendan was saying, that the last time I think I went to Search and Stuff a month or two ago, and brands suddenly seem to have appeared in all the different talks. So it's interesting to see how that's making its way into search, but also to some degree, I'm not always sure what people are talking about when they talk about brand. Are they talking about it in the way that I understand it? How is it planning to be used? Are we talking about things where something is already in place and then search is just a way of getting into that stuff and amplifying all that stuff? Or are we actually going to start to get into the territory of this brand may not be correct for the customer, and then who's in charge of that sort of process? So
absolutely.
Interesting when we're talking about silos as to who look.
No, 100%. I guess that is a trend. You go to these conferences and things, and sometimes one year you can sense that there's a step change, and suddenly one big topic a couple of years ago it was AI, and brand is a component of that, of course. Yeah, I think that is probably one of the more interesting conversations. Because now SEOs are starting to mention, oh, actually the stuff that used to be important is important again. Who actually owns that? How do teams collaborate on those things? The AI component really speaks directly to what you're talking about in terms of actually how you present your site, present yourself across your entire digital footprint, may actually have a massive influence on how you are described to customers in an LLM platform, for example. So actually having teams working together to present a kind of unified vision or a unified message around what your brand does, etc., is increasingly important. SEOs need to kind of work together with the brand owners to do that. And so, of ownership, I think, is a big one. Because, SEOs maybe are not the best placed always to sort of just step right in and start telling a brand what to do and how to do it.
I think it's also sometimes, do you know how to have those conversations? Because they are kind of they're very separate from the world of search. And they get a lot more into the sort of the emotive and the intangible with a lot of things. And they can't necessarily be done with measurement. Not to say that SEOs only do things with measurement, but you know what I mean. And so talking about that stuff and starting to understand it and get to the heart of it can require a slightly different skill set than you might already have. And I'm sure there's some people that have quite happily got overlap with those skills, and then there's some people who may not have overlap with those skills.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of what I'm getting at, I suppose, in the sense that actually there's PR and digital PR and marketing teams as a whole and various configurations. There's lots of potential stakeholders in that conversation. And I think we can debate that brand was always important as a component of SEO and component of user behavior and expectations for results and that sort of thing. But certainly now with the LLM sort of running rife across the internet, it seems critical before.
It's interesting, like looking at the in terms of how brands been looked at over the past kind of 10, 15 years or so, that there was this big thing when social media first came out of how, so suddenly you've got your brand and you've got your brand that you created and sorted out. And you've traditionally been in control of it, in control of what people say. And now suddenly you've got this brand which other people can take and use, and they're able to share things about it and they're able to remix things. And how do you allow people to do that and not destroy what you've got? And that was a big conversation for a long time and kind of continues to be, because people have got ever increasing abilities to do stuff. But the idea that you've got a brand now and an agent or an AI may have an opinion on your brand or may present your brand, and how is it going to do it? Is it going to do it in the way you want? How can you influence it to do it in the way you want to do it? That's quite fascinating, that it's your brand but via a third party and running through another kind of system of filters. So I'm really intrigued to see where that goes. And I know all the conversations around here have always been about how important it will now be to have a strong brand. So I'm really, really keen to see where that moves forward to.
Potentially a good example, I think, of where like SEO, design, brand, this marketing mythical cross-agency team collaboration that we're talking about is going to be more essential, necessary component of going. Like how you handle your reviews, for example. Like one of those things where like there's an element of your brand that's now going to be kind of perceived and spoken about through third-party references and so forth. So actually having sort of your SEOs, for example, working with a brand team to surface pain points, surface competitor insights, surface like keyword research, the types of things that we need to solve or need to address as a brand. There is actually potential for more collaboration as people, again, this is an important thing.
Yeah, I think that's been an interesting conversation again that's been happening. And like you guys kind of started off there, like how are you defining brand? I think obviously so many people oversimplify that as like it's your color scheme and it's your logo and then it's your kind of vibe and that kind of thing. But actually, you touched on something there, Brendan. I think a lot of us have been talking about that reputation management side of things, especially when it comes to LLMs. And I hate to quote Jeff Bezos, but I'm going to do it anyway. His quote about your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room kind of applies to your brand is what people are searching for and what LLMs are giving you in a way. Like, you can have a certain amount of control over that. And obviously things like getting good reviews on things like Trustpilot or industry review sites or Google reviews or whatever it is a certain way of that reputation management, that brand management, all that sort of thing. Mark, do you think SEOs in general align with your definition of what a brand is? Or are we kind of, does it feel like a lot of SEOs are kind of stumbling in the dark? You mentioned you saw a couple of talks. You've obviously heard us in the team mention it a few times. Does it feel like we're just sort of catching up to where you've been, or do we have a misunderstanding there at all?
I think the thing is, I guess it's a word that is used a lot and is, thrown around a lot in the media, and I'm not sure people always get exactly what it is. I think you're right. It's easy to be quite reductive and be, it's just a logo and some colours and what that means. And I think for me, I've always thought of brand as a really interesting way of kind of, you really get into who a company is and what they stand for. It's a really fascinating thing in terms of how you can use that to kind of to shape your own work, your own choices, and try and make sure you get the right staff and you're making the right decisions to fit in with that brand, but also how you then communicate that to your customers and try and make sure they all understand all of that as well. So there's a really big, and it's affected by every kind of touch point as well. So essentially, kind of, I always think of it that there's almost like a little score going on in people's heads, and every time that they interact with your brand, that's kind of, it's almost like a little Sims thing that can be a plus or a minus, right? At any given point, there's so many things that you're trying to control and trying to influence, but I do believe that you can influence all of these things. So that's really where I see it from a search point of view. It's being able to actually, we're using this as a point of view where we can try and leverage the positives of the brand, but also influence both agents and potential users or potential customers about your brand and what it is, and really try and educate people about stuff. And I think that's something that I've certainly not thought massively about before, but actually anywhere where we're interacting with people is fertile ground for doing that. Absolutely.
I think that is kind of one of the directions we're heading in, I suppose, is this idea of digital footprint. It's not just your website, your social reviews. You mentioned all those review platforms, Jack, but it's like, there are Reddit thread talk.
Reddit has been a huge discussion in the industry recently, hasn't it? Yeah.
Even viable for you to comment in that space. How do you combat that sort of?
Yeah, it is a really interesting conversations. That I thought was, sorry, jump in, but that I thought was really interesting that actually those are the conversations that brands should be having, is actually, what spaces are we in? How does this space go with our viewpoint of the world? Should we be in here? Should we be allowed to do this? Is this a thing? Are these people that we want to be interacting with? And so that was the one thing that I took away from the talks of like, that's a real how you would think about that as a brand agency. Like, actually, is this a thing that we should even be involved in? And that was a thing that I thought interesting about the SEO stuff, is that I think often with brand, if you're going to be really good at it, I think it requires hard decisions sometimes, and it can be more about where you stop and you don't do things, or you aren't part of something than things you are, because it's easy to be part of everything and do it all badly, but actually to be like, no, you know what, Reddit is not the right platform for us, it's not where we want to be.
And equally, I suppose, like when to take a risk and do something that's a bit more flavorful, or not quite as boxed in and corporate. Like, what appeals most.
And there's so many examples of kind of big corporates have done fun things on social media, and actually they've managed to take that and influence almost a new set of customers who they never would have been able to speak to by taking a bit of a risk and doing something that they wouldn't have thought. So there's risk is an interesting thing, but that might be something that again is not always. I don't know how much I always feel like search is probably less risky. You're trying to mitigate against risks a lot of the time. So so that might be an interesting new thing about having to take a bit of a leap and saying, actually, we can't be sure this is a thing, but we think this might work as an option.
Fair enough. Yeah. But yeah, something that's occurred to me just while hearing you talk, I do think I'm going to play sort of devil's advocate against SEOs here, which is like an odd position for me to take. Yes. But I do think SEOs in this rush to talk about brand and bring it into everything, typically for SEOs, I think maybe it's a slightly more cynical, like technical approach. Like I doubt, for example, a huge amount of SEOs now talking about this are massively interested in the kind of emotive side and like the uniformity of presenting an experience, for example, or like the kind of psychological aspects of brand that you're talking about, which is actually like, positive feelings and stuff associated with a brand logo and like color scheme and all this stuff that's super fascinating about brand. I think SEOs have maybe fallen into this trap of being like, it's a shiny new concern, and essentially they just want people to be searching for their brand that they're managing, some kind of brand search volume concern that proves that you have authority and contributes to your site authority, and all of the LLM stuff as we've been discussing. So just being a bit cynical there in the sense of like, I do think SEOs will be looking at this kind of just as a kind of another metric, another thing to optimize for, which is how can we get people talking about and linking to and citing brand in a way that it becomes the new KPI and people just do it willy-nilly. Anything that we can do to increase brand search, anything that we can do to increase brand stickiness, search results.
Yeah, I think we have that, like, but again, I'm going to be cruel to the SEOs here. So nobody's on your side this week, SEO. Sorry. I haven't done that on purpose, I promise. But there is that, I guess, need for us to assign a metric, like you were saying there, Brendan. We want brand authority, score out of 100, like you're saying, like, we just want to see the number to go up kind of thing. And I think that is something a lot of people in marketing that crunching the numbers rely on a bit too much. Is there a sort of, are there sorts of data? You mentioned brand search volume there, Brendan. What would be the kind of metrics you would think about when it comes to, you're looking at a client and you're thinking, okay, how do we understand the power of their brand, the size of their brand, the authority, how much are they conveying their message to the right audience? Do you have any sort of ways of measuring that? And Mark, I'll kind of follow up and come with you for that question as well.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I suppose, I would think of it as more of a brand concern. So you are managing a brand, if that is your remit. I've always had a kind of strange obsession with Google's HEART framework. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's more of a user experience kind of paradigm, I suppose, for measuring satisfaction to various degrees with a tool or an interface. But I've often thought of it as a useful framework for thinking about how you want to measure, just like customer experience in general. I'm actually not going to be able to remember off the top of my head what HEART stands for. It's been a while since I've referenced it in a piece of work, flagged it. But I think it's potentially like one of those things you could look to where it's kind of measuring engagement and satisfaction, things like that. You could be running surveys as a brand to actually get some qualitative and quantitative data, what people think and how they respond. That's where I would go in terms of brand measurement. But just to take the SEO point, like there are clients that I'm working with now, where we are reporting on search volume on a brand level. Is your brand volume increasing? Is that an indication that maybe the market is maturing? People are looking more for the brands, less for the generic products or less generic information. Is increasing search volume a sign, an indicator that your organic performance is going to be quite robust? I think I could ramble.
I've got the HEART framework here. So it's happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and then a bit of a cheeky one, task success. So it's hearts, really, kind of. But yeah.
Yes. So you and within that framework, you define like the metrics, the indicators that you would use to measure those things, take them So yeah, the idea of retention, for example, would be a very good yardstick for how well your brand is doing or how satisfied people are with it. Are you able to keep them engaged? Are you able to keep them as part of your customer ecosystem? If not, is there a problem?
Mark, how about you? What kind of, when you're thinking about data and metrics and you're working on a brand strategy with a client, what kind of things are you looking at? Or is it more thinking about the emotive side of things? Or is it a combination of both?
It's a really good question, isn't it? Because how we are thinking about both, I would say. Because otherwise, how do you know whether something has been successful or not? The interesting thing is, I guess from a brand point of view, there's external success, which is what you're leaning into, but then there's also kind of internal success as well, actually, whether that brand is being communicated to your workforce and are they all pulling in the same direction? Is that helping them with their work? But traditionally, a lot of that stuff has been qual and quant. Essentially, it's just can you, like, qualitative stuff, like, can you, do people recognize the brand, and all of the things kind of surrounding that sort of stuff. There are also kind of general brand rankings. There's several companies that do kind of rankings, but I mean, let's be honest, they tend to work with kind of, your big companies. So your average company, if they're not in a particularly sexy market, probably not going to get ranked for something like that. They tend to be kind of consumer focused brands. But really interesting point that Brendan was making, you've also got, you've got all these things like reviews. Are people engaged with your brand? Are people kind of, are they getting what they expect, which might be a review, might be an indicator that they've bought you or your service, but they're not getting what they expected to get from it, which might be that you've not explained what they're getting, or they might not be the right customer for you. So things like that. Whereas actually, if your retention is good and your reviews are good, that might be a good indication of the fact that you're selling what you claim to be selling a lot of the time. So I think it's probably a combination of a lot of these things trying to come together, and some poor marketing person has to try and pull these into stats. But that, you've got socials, and now you will have things like AI as well. Like if we Google the business, what is AI saying about us? Is it saying the things that we want to say about it? So it's going to be a mix of all of these things.
Yeah, and as you're talking about that, I'm reminded of the fact that, we are already on the SEO essentially running brand audits type. When a client comes on board now, a major component of what we're investigating is, well, how many people search for you? How many reviews do you have versus competitors? And do you talk on those, address those? And the LLM visibility is also a component of that. So yeah, I think tied up in that is this idea of sentiment. That is something that SEOs are massively interested in. It's like, the summation of some of those things. So yeah, what does your review presence indicate? Actually, the search results can be a massive mine for information. Are there people searching for things that indicate they don't understand your brand? Are they indicating, that they don't trust the brand? We've dealt with clients of, like, is this website legit, for example? There's also asked data, can also provide a huge amount of brand level questions that can indicate a flaw, as you say, in like the communication of, or a flaw in the understanding of the brand from either side. So yeah, it's actually becoming, a critical part of our process is, are there pain points you're not addressing? Are there problems with the way your brand is communicating that can actually be addressed in a content strategy?
That's really fascinating. I hadn't thought about reusing also asked as a potential kind of do people understand? Or are they actively asking questions because I'm not explaining?
Yeah, or are they asking about your brand in relation to another brand? So what is that brand doing or not doing that presents an opportunity for you?
The competitors that I think are my competitors are actually my competitors.
That's always a question. I know we onboard clients. I say, like, who do you think are like your top 5 competitors in the industry? They'll be like, blah, 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 blah. It's like, that might be true in your industry, but the SERPs tell a different story. The search engine result pages tell a different story. I know you've encountered that a lot, Brendan. I've encountered that a lot as well. And interesting you pointing there, Mark, there's that element of things like people also ask data, like Reddit forums, like all that kind of stuff. And you get those, I know we've had sort of like SaaS clients, and I had an e-commerce client, probably the example you're thinking of, Brenda, was like, is this brand legit? And I remember having the conversation with a client of like, should we address that on our like FAQ page or about us page and stuff like that? This was before AI search really became a thing. So it's 4 or 5 years ago at this point. But it was a genuine question of like, well, if you weren't legit, you would put it on your website and say, yeah, totally, we're totally legit. Don't worry about it. Trust me, bro, everything's fine. So you're not a trustworthy source of that, I guess. It's like, it's kind of a weird way of addressing it. So it comes around, as you were saying, Brendan, that external third-party off-page SEO type stuff. It's the discussions on Reddit. It's the kind of questions. Or if enough people are asking, is X brand legit, that it is integrated into people also. Google has noticed enough people are searching that. That's probably not a good sign. Something has gone wrong there. And also, like, take some of our SaaS clients as well. You get that kind of brand X versus brand Y, or alternatives to brand X, cheaper alternatives to brand X, all that kind of stuff. I do that stuff all the time. If I'm thinking of like, oh, I need a new way to record the podcast, the audio for it, and I can't use this really, I don't want to use Adobe anymore. I need to find an alternative to that. Blah, blah, blah. I was going to say apologies to Adobe. Screw Adobe. I'm not going to apologize to Adobe. But there's that real kind of, you know, comparative searches are huge on LLMs. That is a pretty like definitive, that style of conversational search brings a lot of, hey, I'm looking for this thing. Give me 10 examples and compare them in a table and blah, blah, blah. It's a lot more of an interactive process. And I know, again, in SEO, we've been having conversations about the listicles. And I don't know if you heard this, Mark. There was
just the word listicles makes me laugh.
It's good, doesn't it? Yeah. It almost sounds rude, but it's not quite. And there's this self-promotional listicle thing that Google cracked down on, was if you're saying like, best SEO agencies in the UK, Candour, we're number one. Ha ha ha, we're the best. Actually, Google realizes you're just calling yourself number one. And sure, again, are you a trustworthy source, right? So I guess it kind of comes back around to that Jeff Bezos quote of, what are other people saying about you? How are people talking? How are people perceiving you as a company, as a brand? And I know we've worked with clients of various different sizes, some household names, some you've never heard of and never will unless you work in that industry kind of brands. Is there a kind of, I don't know, sorry, a cutoff point, but where's that the tipping of the scales really, where brand becomes more or less important, or SEO becomes more or less important? And I know to clue you in, viewers and listeners, we had a conversation when we were prepping for this, and I thought of something like Coca-Cola. It's like, have you ever been to the Coca-Cola website? Why would you ever go to the Coca-Cola website? It's all through third-party sellers. Everyone basically in the English-speaking world knows that brand. Whether you drink it or not, it doesn't matter. You see it on shelves, you see ads everywhere, all that kind of stuff. So how much does their website actually matter? How much SEO does Coca-Cola do? Probably not that much, because their brand must be insane. So is there that kind of cutoff point, or is it literally sort of like, you know, absolute household names, do you think?
I think it depends.
You said the SEO thing. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the team. Can't believe it was the non-SEO as first to say it.
I really thought it.
Yeah, we had bets on that, mate.
Oh, disappointing. I can't think of a better way of saying it than that. So it's whether you're...
It's dependent on...
It's dependent on whether you're... where you get your customers from, right? I mean, there would be an argument that if you're, say, you're a small niche business and all of your work is going to be, all of your work or all of your customers are going to come from word of mouth, and there's rarely going to be any point in SEO or even sometimes in design, or there are certain industries where actively kind of anti-design, we talked about, like often things within the cultural realm, that kind of you would do something deliberately a bit weird and provocative is more important. And at that point, the search isn't important, because the people who need to know already know, and the people who want to know will find out, but it really doesn't matter about the search. And then equally, like you said, when a brand becomes a household name, how much can you optimize household name? Probably not. There's probably some poor SEO at Coca-Cola getting really upset with this conversation.
Sorry, Coca-Cola SEO team. I said you don't exist.
I do tend to agree, though. I mean, I think obviously as you get to be the household name, you get to be Coca-Cola, I think brand naturally becomes more complex. Probably got far more conversations and stakeholders to have to get anything changed or moved, or more complicated in that regard, and more important in terms of managing the brand, I guess. But inversely, get to a certain size, there's almost like no storm you can't weather. There's nothing you can't come back from. I do tend to think of it probably as being a more important consideration for the newer sites, newer brands, competitor brands and stuff, in the sense that, these old hat institutions have such an ingrained advantage to a large extent. And just in like pure SEO terms, the fact that everybody knows those brands, links to those brands, searches those brands, there's almost nothing they could do as a brand to like blow it up, and it will look after itself to a large degree. Whereas, a newer brand, a newer website has to compete not just on the brand level, but also on all the generic and the service product quality level as well. That would be my gut reaction. The bigger brands have it easier to a degree.
Yeah. I think I was looking at an example of, I can't remember their name, but there was this skateboard brand the other day, and they do kind of skateboard stuff and clothes. I think they also run they've got their own kind of like ramp set up and things and stuff. And it's a very cool website, but they have a really kind of like, it's this really specific tone of voice where everything is done in these kind of irreverent bullet points. And it's really fun. And they're obviously kind of quite a solid company. They've been going a while. They've got their audience, but you can tell by kind of the copy, that's never been near an SEO because it would never get past it. And it's been done purely because it's really fun and it really makes that brand interesting. So can you organically, by getting something interesting, and that message will trickle out in other forms rather than SEO? Are there going to be certain points where it kind of makes that redundant, because actually the interesting linking and the interesting stuff will come from people naturally and it will feed its way out, rather than you creating something and trying to get stuff to it, which will end up with something inherently slightly more generic?
Yeah, I think there's something in that. Just as we were talking before, just while Jack was asking that very good question, I do think there's something about that, which is, not everything that you necessarily surface needs to be an SEO solution, I suppose. It's like taking that example of like, is brand legit? Presumably that's a starter brand, been around long enough for people to know that they're legitimate, for example. So that the solution to that is not necessarily to add an FAQ on a page that says, are we legitimate, like pointed out. Maybe that's actually more of a design thing. It's what are we not saying about how we're accredited? What are we not saying about how people have enjoyed the service or accomplished things with the service? Are we lacking case study? There's a whole content and design thing. Do we need accreditations on the homepage? Do we need to have compliance flagged in a homepage?
It's interesting as well with looking at that stuff, with the way that things are moving and the fact that someone can now use AI to knock out a website. Will we all start, I imagine we all will start to understand, okay, this is what an AI website looks like. So can I trust this? And then if you've got, so someone could knock that up super quick in a couple of hours and hammer some keywords at it, right? But then you've got a company who maybe have skimped a bit on their own design work and have got some AI stuff, and it sort of looks in that direction. That's going to be the kind of thing where people are going, oh, is this actually a legit website? Because it looks like someone's just cobbled it together using AI. So is that fine? So I think there'll start to be questions like that, I think. I mean, you already get it now to some degree when you get like a sort of what's clearly a templatey website and uses stock, and you're like, oh, there's no real people on this site. It can have all the accreditations it wants, but actually I'm just not sure I buy this as a living, breathing business. So, and I think, that could potentially only get worse with kind of stuff being chucked out all the time. So will brand and design become really important still remain really important in actually trying to establish you as a business that is legitimate and credible, or will it all get so good that everyone looks good? But then equally, as a designer, I think, well, then do you go left field? Do you do something weird? Because it's the weirdness that then promotes you as a human and not as an AI thing.
I think there's a very good argument for that. I think, there may well, maybe not happened yet, but there may well be a big pushback to the generic modernization of content and design, the web in general. this is very much tangential, but I was reading something the other day that was sort of like the idea that, robots are now making up so much of the web. Almost any forum or discussion place is somewhat corrupted. It wouldn't be surprising if you needed to prove your humanity at some point to use the internet or various websites in the future. Kind of fingerprint to prove your human origin so that it's not a robot getting past the capture.
Which they can do now. Yeah.
When proven only.
Yeah, so the idea of actually
that's really fascinating.
Human differentiation in your branding, in your content. I'll make mention of our director, Mark, doing his paint illustrations on LinkedIn. One way that he's distinguishing himself from all of the AI slop images you see across the platform.
We've definitely seen backlash to the generic gig poster thing or the event poster thing where they all have almost the exact same layout with the bullet points of all the highlights and big floaty head images and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of us, whether it's sort of our generation, especially younger, we've seen Generation Z, Generation Alpha kind of fighting back, for one better phrase, not being less accepting a lot of slop stuff. And it's actually the older generations that are like, yay, all the Facebook mums love all their AI slop and stuff like that. But there was also a conversation I can't remember what podcast I was listening to the other day, but it was talking about having human-made assets, so like actually filming a commercial with real people, real products, all that kind of stuff, being more of a luxury thing. So if you're a luxury brand, you lean into almost like you would do with a movie, right? It's like, we're shooting this on 35mm, we're shooting this in IMAX. Look at the size of these cameras. This is Christopher Nolan doing his big, like, this is filmmaking. This isn't just movies. This is cinema, And then compare that to, again, using Coca-Cola as an example, they have fully AI-generated ads that are on TV, on Instagram, on YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Because Coca-Cola don't give a shit. They don't care. Their audience is anyone who will buy this drink, and plenty of people buy soft drinks from all walks of life, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas it was Porsche that came back round and were like, well, we're quite an expensive car brand, and they're German, so they wanted to be very specific about it. And we're like, the whole thing was just a Porsche driving on a nice road, probably in Europe somewhere, like a mountain or whatever. And it was like, this is a real car. This is a real place. Here it is. Here's the cameraman. He's doing this. Da-da-da-da-da. That is a real stunt driver. Like, this is all human, all in camera, all shot, no CGI, no AI slop. And they didn't push anything. It was literally just real humans, real cars, real experiences, full stop, Porsche. That was basically the whole ad, and like driving for 30 seconds. There wasn't like a testing, pushing, blah, 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 big voiceover, anything like that. Do you think that might be where we see websites? You mentioned, Brendan, sort of like the human verification side of it. Or would you see maybe more luxury websites, higher budget in terms of our clients and things like that, if you think about it in that perspective? If you're a huge brand with a big budget, can you then afford to pay a brand team, a design team, an agency or whatever it is, versus someone who just vibe codes their little startup in 2 hours or whatever it is? Do you think that could be you mentioned like users, but you think it could be from perhaps a web design perspective as well?
It's a tricky one, I think, because, I wouldn't say I'm like a blanket defender of AI generative tools and stuff, but there is an appeal, and this is why people are using these tools ultimately, is it maybe saves you some budget. It saves you on having to employ a video team contractually or temporarily, periodically, or permanently. If you can generate a product video of passable quality, if you can generate some copy with AI that would have taken you 3 hours to do, I can sympathize with a small business owner and owner of a small website who wants to do something, meet some kind of quality standard in terms of what's expected of the page without having to, employ an expensive and complicated design process. It's natural that's going to appeal to people. But then, I think you get to this point where you run the risk that your content looks a lot like everybody else's content. And the example you gave there, Jack, of Coca-Cola, is another example where maybe it's less important for them. They can afford to lose a bit of sympathy from a tiny, tiny portion of their massive global audience, having produced some AI slop for their Christmas ads or whatever. But potentially at the lower level, I think it's difficult at this stage to know, what the kind of long-term risks are and whether that's a net positive or a net negative. Because I wouldn't want to say to anyone you can't use these tools, but as we always emphasize, I think it's about making sure it really passes some level of quality. And we are like consistently pushing clients to try and, find some space in their budget for real assets, for photos, videos that they've made themselves. And I don't even think they necessarily need to be super high budget, high production value stuff all of the time. But I guess it remains to be seen whether that does become like a major difference for the smaller brands.
I think it's really the point you just made there about I think it's always trying to do something interesting and different. And I think that doesn't have to be limiting that your tools, that doesn't have to limit what tools you use, although it might do because you might want to use a specific thing. That's a really interesting thing about Porsche are doing. But they've gone, all right, okay, we'll create this set of kind of borders that we can't cross. These are the things that we've got to do. These are restraints on this advert, and this is how we're going to do it. And those restraints are obviously are often where you get really interesting creativity. And that is, to some degree, the danger with AI stuff is that actually you can sort of just do anything, and therefore you do something bad because you don't have the restraint on you to do anything. So I think it's not letting people use the tools. It's the fact that you've still got to think about what you're using the tools for. The tool is only a tool, and if you don't give it direction, it will come back with something average, because that's how it works, right? It's just averaging a load of stuff and going, well, this is the kind of aesthetic or the thing you want because this is what I see out there. And actually, it's having someone behind the tools creative enough to go, actually, we want to go in a different direction, because that'll be what's interesting about this, not what we use to make it. It's that it will stand out.
Yeah.
I think that then points to websites as experiences. And, we've always kind of, again, that's been a thing that's been running around the industry for ages, the idea of experience. But is it... But how much does that still count? Will it just be kind of a luxury thing? Will it just be the brands that have got the money who can afford to do it? And how important will a website be?
That's a big question, I think, in terms of, how much of the website actually forms a part of your marketing strategy in a world where the search engines cannibalize all of your traffic, get there, everything else.
So obviously we talked about humans and bots and all that kind of stuff. Does that affect how you approach design now, Mark? Are you kind of factoring in the agents and the user experience side of things for that? Or are you still kind of sticking to, really, at the end of the day, humans are the most important part of that? Because I think we're having a big discussion of it in SEO, of whether you're building, create content for humans versus building websites for robots and vice versa. Is that similar kind of conversation happening in design? And how do you feel about the sort of future of the agentic web, as so many people are discussing at the moment?
I don't think I'm thinking massively about building for agents in the way that I expect that if we build a site nicely that's clear and obvious and logical to use, the agent will be able to use it. And that's what we're trying to do for a user anyway. So I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out, but I think that's kind of where we're going with it. I think I was trying to think earlier about like the idea of what products and things where we might use agentic search versus where you wouldn't, and who's going to be most effective? Will it just be kind of everyday products that you're like, I know this product, I know this brand, and actually I just want the agent to go and find me whatever is the cheapest version of that, but at a website that has decent reviews and I don't feel like goes against my ethics? And does that cut out all of that traffic? And then possibly with searches that are maybe more complicated or something that you actually want to spend some money on, like, is there a cutoff to the point where I would trust the agent? Is there a monetary amount where I'm like, actually, if it's over £100, you can give me 3 options, I'm going to go and look at all of those myself because I don't trust you past that point, and we will all have different levels of trust, right, in those things. But I was thinking about it in terms of like, if I'm booking a holiday now, I might use, one of the holiday sites to find a hotel. And depending on the cost of that, I might trust that. But if it's an expensive place, I'll probably go, right, I'm going to go and look at some reviews elsewhere. I'll go and look at the website because I want to check this thing is as it says it is. And I'm not just going to trust your kind of view that you've got it. So I'm not sure where we will sit with it. And it's, I guess it's kind of evolving, right? But in my head, I'm still thinking that I'm trying to create an experience for a user that's logical but also interesting, and I'll be intrigued to see how we go over the next couple of years, whether people are like, no, this just needs to be super basic logical because the agent needs to be able to crawl it. But then if we've programmed the agents, do they crawl in a way that we understand?
Yeah,
what we expect them?
I know you deal with a lot of our technical SEO stuff, Brendan, thinking migrations, rebuilds, crawlability, all that kind of stuff. How are you feeling about the agentic side of things? Do you broadly agree with Mark that sort of a good website should be functioning for both? Or
yeah, I do broadly. It is something I'm thinking about, sort of on the technical side of our SEO team and implementation. It's clear it's something that Google is pushing, and where Google pushes, a lot of people will follow. So being aware of it, starting to think about WebMCP and the sort of things you might need to think about for agentic, including, like you said, Mark, like who's going to use that, which brands, clients, etc. legitimately have a case for that. I suppose a major point in your thread there is like, I think adoption rate is a major thing to like think about. It's something I'm saying to clients about AI search in general, and agentic, it implies even more so. It's so new, so infant in its journey to being a channel or whatever, that I don't think anyone needs to break their neck right now trying to make everything work and get agent ready. But I do agree with Mark in terms of, at least, from my understanding, a lot of the agents that are going to be the ones that are going to be buying stuff off your website, etc., will be visual in the sense that they will render the page. They will be looking for CTAs and buttons and navigation to click through. They will have a visual component to, but at the same time, there are going to be some technical elements to that as well. Some code that needs throwing in and around those buttons and those things to say, this is what this does, and this is how you as an agent are going to use it. That seems to be the direction that we're heading in. So yeah, there may well come a point, I suppose, where in the design phase, we're thinking about how we're labeling certain things so an agent can see it. But yeah, this is actually like a fascinating point in my mind about agentic, because it feels like a full circle thing again to me, where people were got to a point, SEOs in particular, of like, well, Google renders this and that, and they can see the HTML and that will do. But actually, part of the emerging standards for agentic is like, have you thought about semantic HTML? Have you thought about using proper classes and divs and labeling things as buttons the right way so that your code is intuitive to a machine? And I just think that's interesting. And when you start out in technical SEO, I think you get attracted to these things, these ideas of like proper heading hierarchy and semantic, labeling the body and the main parts of the articles. And actually that's something that maybe is coming back into fashion, where design and build and SEO actually work together a bit more in terms of defining the page in a code sense. And then, so it's a bit of both, I guess.
You mentioned headings there, Brendan. I think that's something I've come across with plenty of clients, and thinking of how you balance that kind of search-friendly, including relevant search terms, including keywords, thinking about what people are searching for in your page titles, your headings, all that kind of stuff. And you'll often have a battle with like, oh, but yeah, that's our brand term. I'm like, nobody cares about your brand. Nobody knows who you are. You've made that term up. It's a Jack computer. It's like, people don't know what a Jack computer is, so don't use that phrase. But then there is, I guess there is the argument of like, you will never build that brand if you never talk about it, right? So Mark, how do you feel about that? I guess that balance and where the compromises might happen between the tone of voice style and style guides and brand guidelines and that kind of thing compared to making something search friendly in terms of copy and content?
That's a really good point. I think that's probably where we're most likely to have arguments, I would say. I think generally in design, I find that we don't generally have stuff because we're all in the same ballpark of trying to make things flow nicely. But copy, because it's emotive anyway, we're trying to, as a designer and a brand person, I'm definitely trying to get it to do stuff, particularly headings. I'm trying to get to do a job and set a tone for a page. And I can really see how we would run into issues if you want to get a specific set of words into a title that I don't want in the title. Because quite often it might be that actually, although a page is about X, like the title, I want to wander off a little bit and not talk about that. I want to talk about something descriptive about something on the page, but not to tell someone that this page contains X. That's not what I want. So that's really interesting. I think that's definitely where we could run into some tricky issues.
Yeah, I think I'd probably agree in terms of where the modern SEO and designer are likely to rub heads, bump heads against each other, I think is the expression I'm looking for.
More friendly.
Is copy and targeting. It's something that we're obsessed over to some degree on the SEO side is, it's not that we're against emotive language. I'm most certainly not. I think there's a huge amount of space for that. And a page should have room for the aspirational, the kind of fluffy. I think there's room for that. But it's when we start looking at the H1 of the page and we're selling software and the H1 is saying something like, empowering, superb, wicked results. But that doesn't describe the page, you said. And I still think of Google and search engines as fairly literal in the sense that we need to be talking about, we need to be signaling some of what this document, this page, what is it fundamentally covering? So I do think there are compromises there though. I think sometimes it's a case of, keeping your aspirational messaging, but in a tagline or a H2 as opposed to the main H1 of the page. If we were talking page titles, then certainly I want less aspirational, more strict keyword targeting. I think this is where SEO and design start to think about things a little bit differently. Is we're always thinking about the search engine, how that's going to react, and even to a very human-centric, lovely page. We still have to think about it through this lens of, will the search engine get that? And also, will the search engine user get that when they land on the page from the search engine? And that's a difference. I think a critical difference is I think the designer tends to look at the page as a part of a broader structure of linked pages and journeying through the website. The SEO is almost exclusively looking at pages as landing pages a lot of the time. It's your first entry point into the site. So be absolutely clear that it says that it's what they're looking for and all of that stuff. So that's where those conflicts arise, I think.
There's an interesting debate as well about, I guess it's that thing between search getting traffic to a page, but then there's also kind of the conversion of that page. Is it if we make, and this is where I come down to brands and sometimes having to not make compromises as a brand. Like if you're not using the correct wording, is that page actually going to convert the user? So we can get as much traffic to it as want for whatever search terms we want, but actually it's when they get there, it's not going to be right. So is it going to work? And there's a real interest there about the balance, and that's somewhere where it'd be super interesting to just test a lot of stuff and go, actually, can we up the rate? We're going to lose a lot of traffic, but actually if we convert 2% more people, it's much better to have a lot less traffic and a lot better converting page.
I guess that comes down a lot to what measurements you're using, what metrics you're being measured by, what are your KPIs as part of your team. And I can't remember who I was talking to. I think I was on the Search for Sean podcast, And Mordy from SEO Ranking brought up the idea of different teams being responsible for each other's KPIs.
Ooh.
So like the design team is responsible for, they are measured on organic traffic, and the SEOs are measured on conversions. And it's like, hold on a minute. It's like you are forced to work together and have those conversations. And like, I found that, I think it's a bit mad unless you have a very collaborative team,
Yeah.
but it's an interesting kind of discussion of, like you said, where the lines stop with conversion rate optimization, which some people say is a part of design. Some people say it's part of SEO. Some people say, oh, you need to have that. Some people say it's a completely different skill. You can have people who are CRO consultants as a completely separate thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting thing you mentioned there, Brendan, seeing each page as a landing page, for want of a better phrase, right? And I go back to like Stan Lee's thing of like every comic book has the chance to be someone's first comic book. So every one you start off with like, this is Spider-Man. He's Peter Parker. He's a young man living in New York, and you reintroduce Spider-Man each time because it might be the first time they've ever read a Spider-Man comic. But there was a broader conversation in SEO, I know, because there was a discussion about LLM surfacing deeper pages. So really specific product pages and stuff like that might not necessarily be ranking well compared to traditional search. So you might end up, a landing page is now 2, 3, 4 subfolders deep, or literally through the navigation of a website, rather than here are broad main half a dozen landing pages or whatever. And should you treat each one as, hello, this is our brand, these are our products. And you go to the next page, hello, this is our brand and these are our products. Then you go to another page, hello, this is like, okay, yeah, we get it. You could potentially get into the issue of cannibalization, homogenization, all that kind of stuff. If I am a user, I get kind of tired of just, yeah, I know who you are. I've been on the third page. I've been on, piss off. Like, I don't want to deal with this. But there is that argument of, trying to balance what is a landing page, what isn't a landing page, and all that kind of stuff. When you first look at a website, Mark, if you're, having a look at a client's website for the first time, or you as a user at home, you're looking to find something, buy something, what are your sort of initial handful of things you're looking for in terms of, this is a good website, I might like to use this, or things I could improve on a client basis?
I was thinking about this earlier, and I think there's a small set of like layers that I go through. I would say the first one is very much kind of like an emotive read. So I instantly get on this site, and how do I feel about it? Like, is there something about this site that makes me happy that I'm here? Is there something about this site that fills me with dread because it's not going to be a nice experience? Like, does it just look blah? Am I not really interested in it? Like, am I intrigued? Am I pulled in? So there's like an initial kind of read there of stuff. And then I think next layer, there's kind of probably a bit more of a brand and design layer of, so actually what messages am I getting from this site? This is the things that they're trying to tell me. What can I actually understand from that? What am I taking away about the brand? What is the design telling me about this company, and what's important? And then you've got sort of content layer next on top of that. So can I actually understand this page or this website? Is what they do clear to me? Why should I buy this? Why should I look at this thing? Is all of that stuff coming through? Is kind of text legible? I think we were looking at on a website recently, like, this header the font is lovely, but now each word is on a separate line. So it's really pain in the bum to read. Like, those basic things, like how is this working for me as someone that wants to read this website? Or are you putting kind of blockers in my way of doing things? Those are probably like the initial things that hit out at me as a designer of a website about whether this works. Also, I have a little thing as well about, if I can tell someone's not paid a designer to do this, personally, I'm like, well, I'm not sure if you get my business then, because, Guild of Designers.
How about you, Brendan? Is there an initial sort of handful of things you're looking at?
I think it depends if I'm looking at it as a user, casual search. And
are you able to switch off your SEO brain?
I think to some extent. So I think there are certain things that I look at as an SEO that I probably wouldn't think about too much if just navigating mercenary style, trying to find some information that I need. I do think there are things that I look at as an SEO that I look at because they're important to me. So we do update briefs quite a lot, client pages, what can we do better? Like trust signals is one huge component of that. which is kind of an aspect of what you're describing. When I'm looking for a solution, a product, something that I'm searching for online, that question, is the brand legit, is one of the first questions I ask about a web page or a website in general. Where's the team? Where's the team photos? Where's the contact? What's the end point? Do I have to call someone to get information about this? Well, then I'm gone. Similar to what you said, like there are certain quality markers as well. Like I'm a real stickler for good copy. There are spelling mistakes in your copy that just disqualifies you for a huge amount of things. And I think of that, when I'm reviewing a client page for that purpose as well. A level of professionalism needs to come across. So yeah, concern is almost entirely separate in a way from like optimization, SEO standpoint. But yeah, quick routes to the thing that I'm trying to solve is a massive part of it. Am I at a dead end? Where can I find out more about this product? There's not enough on the page explaining how it works. Is there supporting content that I can get to? I'm a big researcher when I'm making purchasing decisions. So yeah, trust signals is definitely a big one. We talk about like views on the page for the testimony, case studies. Is there a phone number? Is there a team that I can see? Are there accreditations? Are you qualified for anything? That's, somewhere in between those two worlds, I think, as a user and an SEO. Those are some serious things to know, like, who am I dealing with? And why should I buy from you as opposed to somebody else? Right.
Yeah, I think why should I buy from you is such something I've been drilling into one of my clients at the moment, is like discuss your USPs, talk about your USPs, clarify how your products are different to insert generic product here and all that kind of stuff. And it was less, I felt like I'm less giving SEO advice there. I think we're doing reviews of all of their commercial pages. They have sort of very top level pages and then very nuanced. Here is a specific bunch of products that make up this broader kind of like service package. And like, how do you define your own different things? Because a lot of the products are similar-ish and kind of cover similar things. There's a sort of like grading of how different each product is, but maybe that's not clear. So differentiating your own stuff versus competitor stuff is a whole other discussion there as well. And I think for me, to pull on both of your threads there, I think it's spelling mistakes, little bits like that. And kind of what we were talking about earlier with like, did you pay somebody to do this? Has this been made professionally? Can you tell this is, I recognize that WordPress template, you cheap bastards, like that kind of thing. Like you're a multi-million, like I have a friend of mine who works for a software company and found out that they are vibe coding their whole website. I'm like, isn't your turnover like £50 million a year? And they were like, yeah. Well, my mate Dan is just doing some vibe coding for us because nobody knows what they're doing and we don't want to pay an agency. I'm like, pay someone to do this. What are you talking about? And the most horrifying sentence I'd heard in a while was, you can't go in and change anything. You have to basically re-prompt the whole thing. Oh, you want to change a page title? You have to re-prompt the whole thing. I'm like, what are you talking? That's insane. You sound like you've, sped up the process and made things easier, but you're actually making yourself much harder in the long run in a lot of ways. And I think, I'm kind of worried about a lot of the, as you're saying, a lot of the slop happening and the increase of that sort of stuff. And I guess in a way that will help us create unique experiences for users, for our clients, things like that. If there's more crap on the web, then hopefully the good stuff, the cream rises to the top and all that kind of stuff. But I guess we'll wrap things up before we get into our recommendations with, where do you think the, overlap of SEO, design, UX, and all that kind of stuff, where do you think that's going to be in the next couple of years? Because we've seen so much change with AI. We've seen so much, the growth of agentic and all that kind of stuff we've been talking about. How are you feeling about it now, Mark? And how do you think we're going to be, if we have this conversation again in 2 years' time, how do you think some of those conversations, some of these topics might change?
I guess my instinct is kind of what we've been saying all along. That I still feel like there's going to be a place for websites. I think some traffic will get hoovered up by agentic stuff, and I think it's often kind of the low hanging fruit, right? It's stuff that's stuff that's quite easy to do, or stuff where you really don't care so much about a brand. Like, I mean, I guess things like food delivery and stuff. Do people, how much do people care about their food delivery brand, or are they just happy to they want a pizza from somewhere and they don't really care who delivers it? It's just going to come in via that. So some of that stuff where people are essentially a commodity and they're not going to be able to differentiate themselves because it only really comes down to price one way or another. And I think some of that will go missing, but that's always been the way of the world one way or another. And I still think that where search and design and brand will come in will be products where you are still able to differentiate a service from someone else. And part of that is people thinking about the products and services that they create themselves and actually really baking that in at a level of, well, what am I doing here that's different? What am I doing that's interesting? And why is that important? And how can I communicate that to people? Whereas I think, if you're just creating something that anyone else can do and easily copy, then you're probably unlikely to have success anyway. So my hope is, my positivity and my hope is that we will all be employed in the next couple of years in a similar sort of field, but that equally technology-wise, it might be now that actually, we're able to do increasingly interesting things with websites because the technology makes it easier to do those things that would have cost an awful lot of money and time before. Actually, we can do some great stuff. We can create some video. The clients can do things in-house which are still on brand, and it might be a bit more about us as agency folk helping people to curate those things and do things properly. But we still have that kind of interesting, that's still our value, is in that ability to curate and ability to direct things as they need to be done.
You talking about that incidentally has reminded me earlier. Because, I do think that's part of the issue now, essentially, is that we've got teams using these tools not fully aware of what their limitations or the flaws in those. So I do think there is something to say. And it does seem to be the trend where companies are moving into using AI more and more. Is your role as a professional is to be a layer of curation, QA above those things, to say, like, these are the guidelines you provide and these are the limitations that you need to be aware of and so forth. But maybe from now, like, creating a brand compliant, very good quality video is just a matter of having devised the right prompts and guidelines and everything around those things. So there's still a place hopefully for SEOs, agencies, brand owners and designers together. I suppose my view is not of some massive revolution. I think, some of what we've talked about is essentially design and SEO are and should and always will be working together. And potentially just as this weird new robotic web emerges, it's just about reinforcing some of those standards and just tweaking some of those guidelines, best practices that we already have in place. Certainly I can see a world where your content to be more compliant with a set of strict brand guidelines becoming more essential. It doesn't seem like much more than a kind of just natural evolution. What a strong, web marketing, digital webmaster team working together should be doing now. It's just, there's a fire lit under us.
Speaking of lighting fires under you, let's get into some recommendations. I like to finish every episode with some actionable tips, some software recommendations, and something fun at the end as well. So, Mark, I'll come to you first. What is one actionable tip you think the viewers and listeners should be trying out today?
Okay, so when we were talking about how you look at websites earlier, I think it's interesting because Brendan, because he has some design background, does a little bit of what I do. But I think it's worth, whenever you're looking at a website or web page, is just trying to strip away the SEO a little bit and just try to come at it as a new user and really get that sense of, it's kind of coming at it from an emotional point of view. How does this actually make me feel? Like, am I getting the things that I would want to get as this type of user to be able to buy something from this site, essentially? Not just content, but everything that surrounds that. What is the feeling that I'm getting? And that's just a really good initial read on any sort of site to go, is this doing the right job before we even start moving into any of the complicated search stuff?
How about you, Brenda? What's an actionable tip you'd recommend?
I suppose it's something that does overlap both design and SEO. It's something I think we talked in the run-up to having this session. Is like user testing or like measuring, actually watching users navigate your pages and websites. It's something that strikes me as like woefully underutilized across all kinds of webmastery, owning a website. And it's something I'm increasingly trying to sure we have as part of our processes and look at pages. But yeah, gosh, it's just something I see as always kind of a casualty of budget or time is actually, let's just test. Let's test how this page does before we launch it. Let's test how, this series of pages inspire certain reactions in users before we commit. That's just something that I think if you're talking about quality and results and satisfaction, like actually getting qualitative data, how people respond to your navigation, respond to your CTAs, respond to the copy page, all of that is worth doing. And I think is to find more ways of ensuring we can do that affordably. Strikes me as a big pain point. It's like Microsoft Clarity as an example. Like, you haven't got that installed. It's a free tool. If you're not at least being a bit curious about how people actually engage with the page once they're on it, more data.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's something, again, talking to a lot of clients about at the moment is that user experience. What are actual real people doing on your website? Do people know how to navigate and all that kind of stuff? The classic thing, the rage clicks is one of my favorite things as well. Like, do they think they can click on that thing and they can't? Or are they trying to exit a thing and they can't? That's always fun as well. You can get negative data as well as positive data, and it helps you better design your website, right? You mentioned Microsoft Clarity there, Brendan. Are there any other tools or pieces of software you'd recommend people check out? Something perhaps lesser known?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a tool that doesn't need the promotion, really. I will give a shout out to Wake. What AI knows about you. It's a tool that, since adopting it, it's been pretty instrumental in our kind of internal workflows. I think you're trying to get an understanding of where your brand is understood versus another brand in the LLM world, and even just down to like the nuts and bolts of what content you have. I will say, as any kind of AI-driven platform, it is prone to some hallucinations, but kind of thought starters that you can get out of there in terms of what your brand needs to be saying, where others are or you're not. Super interesting tool. Super interesting. Am I allowed to promote Query Fan?
Absolutely, yeah.
Query Fan's a new thing. It's one of what I hope is going to be many Candour built tools that we're going to leak out to the SEO community and allow people to play with. So yeah, if you're interested in LLM optimization, those types of questions, Query Fan is a great starting point for that.
Yeah, SEO Innovation Lead Tom's been working on a lot of very cool tools, and we're again having that kind of where so many cool tools come from. Taking also us as another example of what the team here have done. Like, this is something we want to use internally. This is something we're trying to, what is something I want to do that tools don't currently do? You end up kind of building it yourself or, working internally. And then finally, actually, probably people might actually want to try this out for themselves externally as well. So good shout out there as well.
More to come.
Exactly. Mark, how about you? Piece of software, tool, anything like that you'd recommend people checking out?
Interesting to think of something that might be useful for more of a search audience. I spend a lot of my time in Figma and love Figma because of that. But they have a tool called FigJam as part of Figma. And it's essentially like a big whiteboarding tool. And it's, if you ask me for stuff, you will quite often get my reply in FigJam these days, because I really like to think visually and I like to chuck a load of stuff on there. And you can put stuff, you can put notes, you can put videos. There's all sorts of super clever things you can do with it. It has that AI stuff. It will work out flows and things like that for you as well. So it's got lots of cool stuff. But if you are someone that thinks in a visual way, I think it's a really interesting tool to use. And I find it super quick just for sharing things with clients, like, have we thought about this, this, and this? And I can just send them a load of stuff and they can instantly get an idea of what it is that I'm looking for. So that's something that, if you haven't had to play with that, there's quite a few things that do a similar thing, but because that's part of Figma, that's a thing that I use a lot.
Nice. We're talking about being more collaborative, right, across teams. So having something like a digital whiteboard to actually, get the SEO team and to come and make their notes, and then the brand team come to make their notes, the designers make their notes, and all that kind of stuff. I like that kind of collaborative tool bringing everyone together. That sounds fun. And I've experienced a few of your Fig Jams over the years here at Candour, because I know we've worked together on a few projects and stuff as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of fun. I like a little bit of a jam every now and then. And last but not least, something fun. What have you been enjoying recently, Brendan? Have you been watching TV, watching movies, playing video games, reading books, whatever you like?
I'll shout out to Paralives, I guess, which is the new early access rival to the Sims franchise. So it's not feature complete. It has some jank and some issues, but I am having quite a lot of fun just awakening my interior designer, my architect, designing little quaint houses for my paras, not Sims.
Does it have an equivalent of Simlish where it's all like...
It does, yeah.
Hey,
they
nice.
do have their own like gobbledygook kind of language. That sounds a bit like Simlish. So yeah, it's just an interesting franchise to watch if you've been burned by the DLC model of The Sims 4, let's say.
Don't want to encourage EA's microtransactional habits. Yeah.
All about encouraging the underdog. So yeah, it's on early access. When it comes out, I'm sure it will be a decent rival.
From Paralives to, what have you been enjoying recently, Mark?
I had two things for this. I'm going to go with the second one. So a lot of my life, when I'm not designing things outside of work, I dance a lot. I do a dance called the Lindy Hop, which is a 1930s African-American dance. But there's been quite a few studies generally over the course of the years, and there's specifically been one recently about how good dance is for mental health, particularly for people who are kind of people who work at home, which can imagine be a lot of SEOs and stuff. And it's an opportunity to get out and move, but also kind of interact. So you're part of a community of people. I think there's something innately human about wanting to move to music anyway. So I think it's kind of a human thing to do. So that would be my recommendation, that if you're interested in something like that, there is generally a Lindy Hop community in most big cities, particularly London, Brighton, Cambridge, Oxford, Manchester, Leeds. If it's got a university, there's probably one around somewhere. And if you want something to do that's going to get you out of the house after work and meeting some new people, and just moving. And like I said, I think it's a really good thing. Mental health, it's one of those things where you have to be present in what you're doing. And sometimes we all need a little bit of that, a little bit of chance to switch off from everything else and concentrate on what we're doing, and maybe just interact with humans when you're next to them rather than like seeing them through a screen. So that would be my top recommendation.
So like a touch grass, but touch a dance floor instead.
Touch a dance floor, touch another human.
There you go.
It goes.
With consent.
With consent. There's a lot of, yes.
I find the same thing. I do a lot of, since my MMA fight last year, carried on doing a lot of martial arts training and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. And I know you have experience with that as well, Mark. Like, that is definitely a thing of, you really have to switch off because you have to change into your gi and you don't have your phone on you. There's no like option to like, I just put my phone in my pocket. Doesn't have pockets. There's no options. You've got to leave everything in your locker, get on the mats and just be there, be present. Like you said, the only thing you stop for is to have a drink, maybe towel off your face and then get back into it. And I think that is, something a lot of us need right now.
Yeah, it's a much healthier recommendation.
I like video games. You know I like video games too, Brendan. Don't worry.
The digital versus the real.
That was kind of the clash of this episode, right? Exactly. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. Mark, where is the best place for people to follow you, have a conversation with you, all that kind of stuff on the internet?
I'm notoriously bad at social media.
I think you said you had 3 Instagram posts total the other day.
I had 3 Instagram posts total. Then I got bored. But I am about on LinkedIn. So if you want to find me on there, that's probably the quickest, easiest way to do it.
Brendan, how about you?
Yeah, likewise. Abandoned my social media platforms a long time ago. Tend to be too busy at the coalface. But I think it's Brendan Bennett 89 or something like that on LinkedIn. I am very welcoming of SEO chit chat. But yeah, no no cold link building offer. But yes, LinkedIn.
Yeah, I will put both links for your LinkedIn and all the recommendations you've done, all the tools you've recommended as well. And Brendan, I know you're on our Future of Search and SEO panel coming up at Search Norwich XL next month as well, which is very exciting.
That is accurate. Yeah, I am excited about that. Does seem like interesting times in SEO.
Yeah.
Best time to be talking about the future, I suppose.
Definitely, yeah. Brendan will be joined by Charlie Marchant, Daniel Foley-Carter, and EJ Stogden. We'll have 8 other talks and lots of other cool stuff. I know you've been doing a lot of amazing design work. So if you've seen any of the Search Norwich branding and website design and stuff, I know you, Mark, you've been a huge part of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you both for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, likewise. My pleasure.
Thanks, sir.